Welcome back to another Adventure Box podcast day. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Zach Edwards, and I'm the CEO of Historical Conquest. Yeah, these guys. Yeah. So this is actually the podcast that we put together with our curriculum. But ever since we started, we've had a ton of people come in and want to see it on our YouTube channel and also want to listen to it on our podcasts. So we made it available to everyone. And this is the great thing. We are talking about American history, the American Revolution today. And today, if you don't know it, if you're not listening to us today, is January 20th. This is right before Donald Trump is made president, inaugurated the second time into the U.S. presidency. So this is a historic day. This is the second time this has happened in history, in the U.S. history. Grover Cleveland is the the first one to do it. Donald Trump is the second one to win election, lose election, and win it again. So just bring that out. These are the types of things that are happening in these days today. And there are a lot of contentions between both sides. So in this podcast, we actually get rid of all those. We don't care what side you're from. We want you to listen because either side will learn a great deal because we're talking about history. Fact, not bias. Facts, not lenses. When I went to, I had a focus group with a group of people. The first thing that one of them said was, "What's your lens?" I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "What's your lens? You have to have a lens when you're writing a curriculum." And then the other teachers looked at her and said, "That's the thing. That's the reason why we like this group. They don't have a lens." That's right. We don't have a lens. If you do bad things on one side, we will call you out for it. If you do bad things on the other side, we will call you out for it. If you do great things, we will call you out for it. We don't care what part you're from. That's right. It doesn't matter what side you're from. This is all about you, me, and history. We're just regular people talking about history, giving the ins and outs of what was happening. Now, last time, we talked about the Philadelphia campaign for the British. Now, the British, after winning New York, they came down and took over Philadelphia. They came down into the bay below, and then they marched up. And when the Americans thought they could stop them, they couldn't, and they busted in and took over Philadelphia. Luckily, the Continental Congress had already moved out to another location. So they were actually safe from Philadelphia, from the British, and the British had a new city. This is one of the turning points for the British, where it really should have gone their way afterwards. Now, then we talked about the Battle of Germantown, but I didn't tell you about one big thing that was happening with the Battle of Germantown that I'm going to tell you right now. So one thing that was really interesting is in the Battle of Germantown, October 4th, 1777. So this is a year and a half, 2 years into the American Revolutions. Remember, the Lexington and Concord happened around 1775 in April. So this is 2 years later and then some. And this is a major engagement, Germantown was, because this is right outside of Philadelphia. I'm going to actually show you a map. If you're looking at the podcast or the YouTube channel, you're going to see this image. Don't worry, it's just a very stone fortified looking house. This is the Cliveden House, also known as the Chew House. So when it was actually started, when it was actually built, it was built for Benjamin Chew. He was a loyalist. He, like the British, as a loyalist, that's what a loyalist is. He's a supporter of the British. And he built this house, not for them, of course, for himself. But the whole exterior is stone. And I'm not talking about a stone veneer, which is basically like a thin piece of stone that you stick to the wall. No, these are like full-on stones. So this is like a fortress. This building is made to withstand bullets from black powder guns. And so you had about 120 British troops during this time hide in this mansion right here that you see on this video. I'm actually going to pull out from that. This is the house. It still stands today. And if you zoom out, you'll see that it's right above Philadelphia in one of its suburbs. And this is actually when the Germans took over, when the British took over Philadelphia, Germantown is where one of the battles was fought. Now, this was actually a really big one because this is what basically kept the people from the British and the colonists from attacking each other in Philadelphia. Okay, stop. Sorry for that. That was my daughter. She needs to learn to knock. So I had to pause it because I knew she was coming down here. Okay. Anyways, so Germantown was so important because this is a point where the colonists were actually trying to take back Philadelphia. And they thought if we could take over this area, we can win. Well, when they came into Germantown, what they didn't know is in the Chew House, they had a full, not garrison, a full battalion of British soldiers. Again, 120 British soldiers, regiment, that's what it was, the 40th Regiment that was stationed inside. And so when they were walking by, when they were searching the area, they had a volley of bullets fly out of those windows and take out a lot of the colonists, the Continental Army. So I didn't mention this, but this is actually a really big point during the Battle of Germantown. Okay, so now let's go into what we're talking about today. Today we're going to be talking the Battle of Freeman's Farm. Now there's actually two battles, September 19th, and then a later battle as well. I think it's in October. We'll get there when we do. Okay, but starting off, September 19th, 1777. This is the start, the first engagement, the Battle of Saratoga. This is the national park of Saratoga. So it's in this little area, and it's right outside of New York. See, it's around the border of New York and Vermont. What makes this significant is you actually had, remember that the British, the colonists were trying to take over Quebec and Montreal. They took Montreal, but they could not take Quebec. Why did they want to take it? Because they knew that it would be a staging area for British troops. So during this point, you had a group of British troops led by, and I'm not going to get his name correct exactly, but it was basically General Burgoyne. I think it's Burgoyne. So he came from Quebec City, and probably also Montreal, and then came down this river. This is the, I can't think of it offhand. This is the, what river are you? There we go. Huh. I cannot get that. Whatever river that is. Holy cow. This is Lake Champlain. And then this comes down into, there we go. Lake George. Oh, that's still the lake. Can't remember the actual river. Come on, there's a river that comes out of it, and it's called, oh well, we'll get to it. Well, anyways, so General Burgoyne comes down from the north, comes through Saratoga, and this is a major, major battle. Now, during this time, you have Burgoyne on the British side, and you have Horatio Gates. He is the leading official for the Continental Congress. You also have Benedict Arnold, who's just under him. So this is the next step down from Horatio Gates. Now, during the conflict, they actually worked fairly well together. But near the end of this battle, there's some knocking of heads of the two. They are not happy with each other. Why? You have to learn a little bit about Horatio Gates. Horatio Gates was a very cautious man. He fought with caution and a very defensive strategy. At the same time, Benedict Arnold was a hothead. He was proactive. He loved doing things that were like proactive and exploiting the weakness of other troops and other people. But he jumped at the gun when it came to doing things that he needed to do, or that Horatio Gates had already told him not to do. Benedict Arnold would fight him on it. So the conflict basically came from disagreements on their battle strategies. Benedict Arnold, if you remember his history, and we're not going to go into the future history because we'll talk about that when it happens. But at this point, he's like, you know what? I'm going to take this over. We're going to take this over. Let's go get him. And Horatio Gates said no. So before that actually happened, Horatio Gates actually stripped Arnold of his command. Arnold had no command of the troops. And he said, you're done. This is right before the battle. And so the word didn't get out to everyone. So Arnold was actually sent to his tent to wait out the battle. Well, Arnold had a different idea. Benedict Arnold decided that he was actually going to be part of it and he wasn't going to tell anyone. So he escapes detention inside his tent and he goes out to the field. Now his troops, again, do not know that he's been replaced. They are basically commandless. Horatio Gates is with his troops, does not know that Benedict Arnold is about to do this. So he attacks. What Benedict Arnold does is he rides out in front of his men and yells out, "Attack!" when they were not supposed to attack. They were supposed to be defensive because that's what Horatio Gates wanted them to do. But because of this, they come in and they attack the British Army and they win. The British Army actually retreats at this time. So thanks to Benedict Arnold. But the aftermath is not very happy with Benedict Arnold. And this actually leads to his downfall. What are some of the things that he does that happen? You have Benedict Arnold. His credit is diminished. He is no longer a reliable officer because they can't trust him. He jumped at the gun. He did something he wasn't supposed to. He went against orders. You can't trust someone like that. If you can't trust someone like that, you're not going to go to battle. They will keep you out. It's called subordination. You are going against the official who's over you. You're going against the command of your commanding officer. If George Washington had told Horatio Gates something and then Benedict Arnold went against it, he would be going against George Washington. If he served under George Washington and didn't trust him, Benedict Arnold would have done his own action and could have screwed up what George Washington was trying to do. So they had to take him out. So basically, they diminished him. They demoted him. What else happened? You had Arnold's outbursts. So Benedict Arnold was openly confronting officers at this point. So at this point, no one can trust him. Now, Arnold actually, again, remember, Gates is his commanding officer. Arnold went in front of everyone, in the public, his troops, and attacked Horatio Gates, calling him dishonest, a poor leader. Now that is actually sentenced to death. You could actually be killed for doing something like that. Because basically, ultimately, what it does, it just destroys your command of all these troops. The troops then start not being able to trust you or worrying that you are dishonest or a poor leader. And Arnold knew that. So his command was stripped. Gates relieved Arnold of his field command. Done. He's no longer going to fight. At least not with him. And Arnold had to be sent back to the Continental Army and work it out with George Washington. So this was actually a huge ordeal. So despite being sidelined, there's one other battle that Arnold fights in. He had a desire to fight the American cause, so he had the reasoning to be there. An unauthorized but legendary charge was at the Battle of Hemis Heights, October 7th, 1777. This decisive action helped to secure a pivotal victory. Even as he suffered a serious leg wound, the victory ultimately forced Burgoyne to surrender. Now, this is the second battle. So this is the second battle. This is actually, sorry, this was the time when he was actually reprimanded to his tent, escaped, and then led his men into an attack. So it wasn't the first one, it was the second one. But this first one is where the conflict started. The second one is where Benedict Arnold actually attacked. Okay, so with that being said, let's go into the actual Battle of Saratoga. Now, this is the second battle of Freeman's Farm. This is October. This is the same time as Benedict Arnold. But we'll give you the rest of the story. I only gave you the Benedict Arnold story. So today we'll focus on that. Today we'll also focus on the hardship faced by Washington's army during the Winter of Valley Forge and how it transformed the Continental Army and the French involvement in all this. So we've already gone over the Battle of Germantown, which was actually a recap from the last podcast. We went over Benedict Arnold and what was happening with him. So you got a little bit of background of what was happening during the Battle of Saratoga, between the first battle in September 19th and the second battle of Freeman's Farm, October 7th. Okay, so let's go into the second battle. Let's talk about this. British strategy. The British General George Burgoyne planned to cut off New England from the rest of the colonies by advancing south from Canada, like we were talking about. However, his forces were slowed down by the terrain that was there. They had mud, they had swamps, they had all these different things, mostly because they were in a flood area. Because as I was telling you, they went down this river. Now, they did not float down the river. They marched down the river. And the places around it had too many woods, had swamps, all those things. So it was hard for him to get through. On October 7th, so this is after the September 19th attack, on October 7th, Burgoyne launched an attack near Freeman's Farm. Again, this is the second attack. American forces, led by Horatio Gates, and we're going to talk about Benedict Arnold, where we already have, but Benedict Arnold defeated the British. Arnold betrayed Horatio Gates, but played a crucial role in a counterattack which broke the British lines and allowed the Continental Army to win. The outcome was General Burgoyne, his army surrendered. The forces surrendered, gave up everything, October 17th, 1777. This marked the first major victory of the Americans and proved they could defeat a professional British army. Why is that important? Well, because you had somebody, I can't remember what his name is. I think his name was Benjamin Franklin, that's right, and John Adams. They were over in Europe. They were trying to get the French to side with them. The French hated the British. They did not want the British to win. They did not want the British to get any more strength in the in the Americas. So, of course, the French were ready to align, but they wouldn't. They wouldn't because they didn't think that the Continental Army could take on the well-trained, professional British Army. I don't doubt them. I totally understand what they're thinking, why they wouldn't side with them. Would you side with an army that, if it blew up and the Continental Army was defeated, the British would then come after you? The British would come after you because you supported that other group. They come after you. That's just another war. French and Indian War. Remember, the 7 Years' War. They had just gone over this war, and now another one was starting. So the French basically said, we don't want any part of this unless you can prove that you're going to win. If we know that you're going to win, we will come and aid you. Or if there's at least a good chance of it. And so, at the Battle of Saratoga, the reason why it was so important, because they won. And it was not that this huge battle. It was just a decisive battle. And decisive because when the French saw it, they saw that they could take on Burgoyne, the British officer with a lot of troops, and the Continental Army could fight them and defeat them. The French decided to come in. They decided to align with the Continental Army. Here's another thing to think about. Okay, Benedict Arnold. Who was he? Okay, he was a great patriot. He took over Ticonderoga, helped take it over. He helped in the fight, even though they lost, the fight for Quebec City. He fought on a bunch of other major but smaller battles. And what you're going to find out later on is that he turned sides. Because of his decisive action, even though it was against the command of Horatio Gates, he wins that battle, allowing the French to see, we need to side up with this group. But what he does, he benefits the Continental Army, and then he changes sides to the British. Horatio Gates becomes a traitor later on. We'll go over that and how it happened, why it happened later on. But this just gives you a little bit more insight into Benedict Arnold. So people can actually tell you, don't be a Benedict Arnold. It means don't be a traitor. Don't be a traitor to your cause. Now, let me just say this. Why would France decide to side with the colonists? First off, France wanted revenge. They wanted revenge for losing the 7 Years' War and saw it as an opportunity to weaken the British. If you weaken the British, there's a chance that you can come back and take over again. Here's another one. The French leaders, King Louis the 16th, and Foreign Minister Vergennes were persuaded by Benjamin Franklin's diplomacy. So Benjamin Franklin was over there and tried to talk him into doing it. Well, it took them a while, but then Benjamin Franklin was able to tell him, hey, we just won the Battle of Saratoga as well. We are showing you that we can take them on. We've had other victories, such as like Boston. You need to side with us. We need your help. So they create something called the Treaty of Alliance, 1778. Wait a minute. They won Saratoga in 1777. Remember, there's no social media. There's no mass communications. There are no telephones, no telegrams. If you wanted to get a message to France, you had to float it. Remember, October. They won in October. This is right as winter was starting. Because winter was starting, they couldn't just float over. Because when the winter starts, the Atlantic Ocean becomes treacherous. What sank the Titanic? An iceberg, right? During the winter. So, or during at least the cold period. So, yeah, if you want to get a message over, you either go slowly through the Atlantic Ocean or you wait till the next year. But by this time, France got the information through Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin shared it with King Louis XVI and the foreign minister, and they were able to finally align. During this time, though, even before the alliance is actually signed, there's someone that's down in Valley Forge with George Washington. And we're going to tell you this in just a second. But first off, what did the French promise them? They were going to side with them. What they were going to promise them? They were going to send the French Navy. Now, this is the great thing because the Continental Army and the Continental Navy was a makeshift group. They didn't have much when it came to ships. They couldn't actually build ships because this was basically, everything was British owned. The only ships that they could do are ones they could revert to becoming take the ships that are already built and refurbish them to be military boats and put cannons on them and such. That's all they could do. They could not build, they didn't have the time, and they also didn't have the ports in order to do that because the British would stop them in those ports. So the Navy from the French was essential. What else? The French troops. They needed French troops. They needed artillery. They needed money to support the Continental Army. They had no money. Now the French had just gone over a really expensive war, but they did still have money because they had a few years to rebuild the coffers. Coffers by the sense of like a bank. They could rebuild the amount of money that they had in store and ready to go to battle. And so, French General Marquis de Lafayette became a crucial part of Valley Forge. And again, I will get there in just a second. Last thing. With France's entry, Britain had to divert resources to defend its colonies and its other worldwide interests again. So they could not focus everything on the American continent again. Yeah, so by reopening possibilities of war in India and Africa, in Europe, now the British was all of a sudden like, wait a second, we just ended this battle. Like, well, the French are like, too bad. You got to come back over here. You got to bring some of your troops here or we're going to take over Britain. So could France have taken over Britain at the time? Yeah, technically they could have. If the Britons had actually sent all their troops over to the American continent, France would say, great, you're undefended. I'm going to attack you and I'm going to take over Great Britain as well. So now Britain has done this balancing act. Okay, we have the American continent. It's making us a lot of money, but we cannot lose our homeland. we're not going to lose the Indian trade. So they had to diversify and spread out the efforts. So the French, by entering, made it very difficult for the British to focus on just one place, the American continent. Now they have to focus all over the place. Okay, now let's go to Valley Forge. Valley Forge, it's the winter of 1777 to 1778. They just won Battle of Saratoga, so everyone's in good moods, right? Yeah, maybe not. Remember, it's winter. It's winter in Pennsylvania. What are winters in Pennsylvania like? Humid, so wet, cold. Wet, cold. Snow, rain, cold. Not a good mix. I live in Missouri. It is now 9 degrees outside, 11 degrees. It was 4 degrees this morning. I was about to go for my run, and I was like, maybe I won't do it today. But 11 degrees. Come to find out, my family, who are in Idaho, it is negative 21 degrees. I will take 11 degrees anytime. But these people in Valley Forge, they did not have the heaters, the furnaces, the comforts of the modern day. They were soldiers freezing in tents. They lacked food. They lacked clothing. They were dying of disease and exposure. Nearly 2,000 soldiers died during this encampment. And this is the biggest one. Remember, they're on 1-year contracts. I told you this last year. Between 1776 and 1777, 1-year contracts. That was their first year overdoing it. Now they're on their second year. Do they stay in? They stay in one time, they get their pension. They get the amount of money after the war ends. Okay, what about now? What do we do? Do we stay with the Continental Army? Or do we go home and try to keep warm with our families? Well, a lot of them stayed. And good thing that they did. The British weren't going home. They had to float across the ocean. And they were a professional army, so they had to stay. There was no 1-year enlistment. So the morale, despite their hardships, through Washington's leadership, he brought them all together and kept them together. The morale was still high, even though some were dying. Okay, what else happened? Now, I told you about Lafayette, but the person that was actually helping them in Valley Forge, his name was Baron von Steuben. He was a Prussian military officer. Prussian? What's Prussian? Is that Russian? No. Prussia was actually a major country outside of Austria, Prussia, Great Britain, and France. Those were the 4 main, there's Spain too. 5 main European countries. Russia was just gathering strength at the time. So that would be 6. Prussia was one of the strongest ones. So Baron von Steuben arrived in Valley Forge at this time. Basically around the same time that he found out that the Battle of Saratoga was won. And the French were potentially going to be joining up. So von Steuben, he gave them the manuals on military training and became the foundation of the American military practices. So he actually designed, as a Prussian, he designed the training to actually get the Continental Army where they were supposed to be at this time. Remember, they're still a ragtag group of men with fairly little training, like official training, and they've been battling for over a year. So him coming in and helping at Valley Forge was immense, because again, these people were dying. The others were being overly exposed to the winter. They were freezing. Their clothes weren't that good. It was thanks to France that they would actually get more new clothes, more food, more pay. So by the spring of 1778, the Continental Army was literally, finally, an army. It emerged stronger, more organized, and ready to take on the British. They weren't really before that. So, I got some things to think about. Here's some takeaways of what we've been talking about. Okay, 4. I'm going to do 4 because I'm going to add one that's not on my list. So, you are told to obey an order. Now, there's a conflict there because you might be a better military leader, but your commanding officer said something, and you don't know what their whole plan is. Here's the thing. Benedict Arnold, he didn't know what Horatio Gates' full plan was, but he knew what would win. So, did he do good? Or did he not? I'm going to leave that up to you. That is your that's one of 2 interactive questions I want you to think about and answer. Talk to your parents about that. I'm going to tell you that because think of it. Your commanding officer at home are your parents, right? They're going to tell you something. Now, one thing that might be different between like Horatio Gates and Benedict Arnold, they had a lot of the same experiences, and they were fairly close in age. The difference between your parents and you, they're a lot older. They've experienced a whole lot more. There might be reasons you do not know as to why they're telling you that, but actually might help you in the future. Okay, so let's takeaway number 1. Takeaway number 2, the Battle of Saratoga was the turning point of the American Revolution, right? They won the Battle of Saratoga. France was convinced to start entering the war and to start fighting on the colonist side, not the British, the colonist side. Now, the second one, French assistance. What did they give them? They gave them troops. They gave them supplies. They gave them naval power. And then they also strengthened the American cause. Now, one thing, again, that's not in my notes, but again, we talked about it, is because they did what they did, the British could not send all their troops over. They had to keep Europe safe. They had to keep India safe. And they had to keep Africa safe from attacks from the British. They knew this. So it spread out the strength of the British so they could not focus completely on the American Revolution, which is actually one of the biggest reasons why the continent was won, why the Continental Congress won, why George Washington won, why the American Revolution was won by the Americans. Last one, the winter at Valley Forge. It was horrible. People were dying, but the morale was up. How is that? Because of the great leadership of 2 people, George Washington and Baron von Steuben, an American officer who became president later on, and Baron von Steuben, who was a Prussian, did not have a hat in this race. He could have stayed in Prussia and been just fine with whatever the outcome came, but he also did not like the British at the time. So he did not want the British to become stronger, so he put support, just like the French did, and the Prussians won out because it weakened the British. As one of the major powers, the Prussians did not want the British to become more powerful, which they would have if they had another continent. So comes the second interactive question. Imagine you were a soldier at Valley Forge. You were enduring the cold. You were starving, hungry, maybe even starving. What would keep you motivated to stay in the fight and fight for your independence? Okay? Think about that. What would actually keep you in? Why would it keep you in the fight? What is most important to you? Cold and being miserable? Or independence? Just think about that. Share that with your parents too. I'd love to hear what you have to think, or what you think. So put it in your comments, in the comments below. If it's not there, like if you're listening to the podcast, email us. So email us anytime. We want to hear what you have to say. So please send us your information. Love to hear it. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day. Remember, this is Inauguration Day, so let's pray that the next presidency comes in and things get better. Because as of right now, people are not happy with the prices, with freedom, with all these different things that are happening, and a lot more. So hopefully things get better. And if they don't, well, it's 4 years, and then there'll be another president. So keep that in mind. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.